Let's move on now to our next story. It's got to do with Nigeria's fiscal gains. So away from insecurity and now to a story that you should know about. Well, here is what you should know. Nigeria's fiscal gains from the removal of fuel subsidy have been fully absorbed by rising debt servicing costs. Now, leaving the federal government with limited room to actually fund infrastructure, stimulate growth, or deliver effective social interventions. This is according to CFG Advisory. While presenting the firm's 2026 economic outlook at the Financial or Finance Correspondents Association of Nigeria (FICAN) Forum, the advisory noted that debt servicing in the proposed 2026 budget is estimated at 15.52 trillion naira, exceeding combined allocations to education, health, security, and defense. It cautioned that the economy is exhibiting signs of stagnation, driven by high costs, weak growth, persistent deficits, and weak social intervention outcomes.
The firm also warned that election-related pressures and poor coordination across fiscal, monetary, and industrial policies could slow reform momentum, while calling for urgent fiscal restructuring, including asset sales and improved capital spending to restore sustainability and inclusive growth. Join us this morning to break this down for us is Economist Kalu Aja. A warm welcome to you, Kalu, and thanks for joining us on Breakfast Central. And also, Happy New Year to you.
Good morning, Happy New Year, guys. Good to see you again.
Now, Kalu, does the absorption of subsidy savings by debt servicing undermine the credibility of Nigeria's fiscal reforms? Could you interpret what this means for us?
Yeah, well, so if you look at the budget in simple terms, right, we have, it's really an oil budget. We budget a dollar amount to sell and a dollar and a production number to sell. Those two figures, the dollar amount that we sell crude oil and the production numbers we export, give us our general revenues. This is important because if you look at last year, we produced about $75 per barrel to sell $2 million per barrel. That didn't happen. Oil is about $65 and we're at about 1.4 million barrels a day that we're exporting. This creates a big fiscal hole that we then have to borrow to cover the fiscal hole to fund the budget. So if you look at 2025, the figures we got half year 2025, we are running about 72% revenues, right? Revenues to debt service, which means for every 100 naira we get, about 72 naira go to service the debt. This is not to pay salaries, not to do capital expenditure, just to pay or service the debt, about 72% from half year 2025. So when you have a budget like that, you just wonder, how else do you then pay salaries or do anything to budget? That's the problem. That's what the report is saying. We've borrowed too much because the revenues have not come in, and now we have a quote-unquote debt trap. So as we approach 2026, you then begin to wonder, we're going to borrow about 2 trillion a month. 2 trillion a month. And if anything happens to oil prices, that's going to go deeper. So it's a red flag. It's been flashing for about 2 years now for Nigeria that we're not getting enough revenues into the country because we're depending solely on crude oil revenues. And that's what that report is basically highlighting now.
Well, my question would be, just recently, a member of the All Progressives Congress did make a very blatant and strong statement. I'm just trying to ensure I can get his name right, but I mean, time would fail me. But he did say that in true sense, the president only made an announcement that he removed subsidy, but he did not. So
yes.
let's just think out of the, wild that subsidy actually hasn't been removed. We're not saying we're taking his word, but let's just say it's not been removed. What's this rigmarole? What's this back and forth we're talking about using the subsidy funds for infrastructure and so on and so forth? Can that really be true? Can that really be true? Because now we're hearing that there are no more funds, so we need to still borrow to fund projects.
Yeah, well, that's a big conundrum we've had in Nigeria since 2023. The subsidy has gone. It's removed. What subsidy removal simply means is that you have more revenues. Because when NNPC exports crude oil, it doesn't have to pay itself for subsidy. So all those funds flow back to FARC. So if ordinary subsidy has been removed, look at FARC. FARC has doubled, and that's the subsidy revenues, the cash event that's occurred back to Nigeria. The problem is that even with the subsidy removal, oil sales have not kept pace with the budget projections. So we have to borrow. For 2025, we're borrowing $1 trillion a month. And even if you look at the numbers, we borrowed about 12 trillion. The capital budget, only 6 trillion was released. That's for 2024, not 25, 2024. 2025, the figures we got, which is half year, it's about only 10 trillion released. So it's a big gap in terms of we are borrowing, but that borrowing isn't going to infrastructure. That is clear. It's going to salaries and debt servicing. So irrespective of if subsidy has gone or hasn't gone, the country is not generating sufficient revenues to meet its obligations because we are spending too much. We are spending way too much on high projections of crude oil revenues that have not come in. Hence, we go back to borrow. And it's getting worse. This year's budget, like I said, we are projected to borrow about 2 trillion every single month. So it's a big debt trap we'll be looking at.
I mean, 2 trillion every single month. I'm struggling to fathom how we can get ourselves out of this fix we already have found ourselves in. But CFG Advisory had made some recommendations. They recommended asset sales and privatization meaningfully, and they say that this will reduce the debt burden. Do you agree with the options that they've suggested? And if you do, what is the implementation? What would the implementation of it look like?
Yeah, so clearly when you have a big, in this case, a sovereign revenue issue, not an insolvency issue, right? We just don't have the money. You've got to generate funds almost immediately or in the medium term. When you sell an asset, that's not going to be a quick revenue event for you. Look at, say, Nigerian Liquefied Natural Gas. Nigeria has 49% there. If we sell 10% or even 5%, that's going to bring in lots of dollars that we can use to pay down the Eurobonds. Eurobonds are the problem because we are paying commercial rates to Wall Street. If we can pay down the Eurobonds, then the World Bank loans are more, in quotes, but their terms are a bit, should we say, cheaper than the Eurobonds. So if we can pay down those high expensive debt that we have, it releases more funds to then flow back into the budget. But that's a medium-term strategy. The immediate strategy is to have an austerity budget to say, going forward, we're not going to spend as much as we're spending. So if you have an austerity budget today, then you can control the spending whilst you then pursue the asset sales that are going to come in the future. If you look at this budget that we just came out 2026, it's riddled with the same over-bloated spending on solar powers, boreholes, grinding machines in the billions. There's still a lot of waste in this current budget. So we haven't learned the lesson of cutting our coat according to the cloth that we have. We are spending too much. This has making us to borrow too much. And of course, we then fall into that debt trap. So medium term is asset sales. But immediately right now, you've got to pivot to an austerity budget where you spend less than what you're making to give yourself that fiscal room to maneuver.
So if I hear you correctly, are you suggesting that the budget that we have as is cannot work and a new budget has to be put together and represented?
All right, the budget that we have right now, we spend too much, we're borrowing too much. We're already saying we're going to sell at $64 a barrel crude oil. Before we had the crisis with Venezuela, oil was about $60 a barrel. If there's peace with the Ukraine, oil is going to go below $6 a barrel, but we're already budgeting $64 a barrel, right? So you've got to give yourself room, and that's just the revenue side. On the spending side, we are spending way too much on constitutional projects, on waste. Solar street lights, millions. We're refurbishing homes of Obas, we're buying buses, we're buying motorcycles, cash grants. The budget is a joke, right? So you've got to really look at that budget and say, what are the necessaries must have? And that's where you want to spend money on. Health, human services, insecurity, focus on that infrastructure. Not all this stuff to do with we're renovating a religious home or there's too much waste, fraud, and abuse in the budget 2026. If possible, pause it, go line by line, zero budget, and get a real austerity-based budget. Otherwise, we're just going to keep on borrowing.
Now, Kalu, let's talk about the diagnosis that you've given so far on Nigeria's economy from our conversations this morning. It's obvious that we do lack fiscal discipline, and we also have a revenue generation problem. The federal government this year kicked off the new tax laws on the 1st of January, which is meant to address this revenue problems that we have, so we could reduce borrowing and the debt burden. How much, if implemented to the letter, how much of the needle towards solving our revenue problems will it move? Would it make much of a difference in 1 year?
Yeah, well, so clearly, let's assume everything goes as planned and the tax laws, everybody adopts it, we start to pay taxes. We're going to raise Naira taxes. There's some dollar components there, but we're going to raise mostly Naira taxes in VAT, in corporate income tax, which is where the bulk of the revenues for the government is going to come from. But the problem, guys, is the debt servicing in dollars, because we have these Euro bonds that we're spending trillions to service. Like I said, half year 2025, we're spending about 72% of our revenue to service the debt. That's the problem. You can't print dollars. We also don't earn dollars from VAT and corporate income tax. So we've got to then, we're going to get lots of Naira, but we need dollars to pay down the debt. That's where the problem comes. Again, there's a timing issue. We're going to pay our taxes mostly in 2027 for 2026, right? Which is the year we're in. So there's a timing issue that, but we incur our costs today, but the revenues are going to come later down the line. So that timing issue, that timing has got to be financed together with the projected fall in oil prices. So again, if you look at the whole picture, costs are there, revenues are not so sure. So the tax reform is going to bring in tons of new revenues, but we're already spending that revenue today by borrowing 2 trillion a month. If we simply cut the budget down, we don't have to borrow 2 trillion a month. That gives a lot of allowance to then say whatever revenue comes in, we can use to then do infrastructure and to pay salaries rather than doing debt servicing.
Okay, I mean, it seems a bit scary, you know, what the reality is. You've made medium and immediate suggestions as to how we can navigate this. But CFG seems to have made some projections that maybe it's not all doom and gloom. They've predicted 5% GDP growth, MPR below 20%, single-digit official inflation, and exchange rates between 1,400 and 1,500. From where you stand, is that a light that we can see in this tunnel that has looked really dark?
Yeah, so I don't want to be pessimistic. Let's give me the numbers, right? So there's a report also that came out, again, I saw it on statistics, right? 85% of Nigerians earn less than 100,000 Naira a month. So all the VAT is based on consumption. Corporate income tax is based on consumption. I just got to consume to generate these taxes. When you see GDP is going to go up, the way it works, the GDP goes up, the economy becomes more productive. You can then tax that productivity and raise revenues. Or is the economy today an economy that can create revenues and create jobs that can be taxed? That's the problem. There's a lot of unemployment in Nigeria. So you have a tax regime that is very, very good. But if Nigerians do not get jobs and do not spend and consume, you're not going to generate those taxes from Nigerians as being planned. The issue is GDP does not pay down debt. Revenues pay down debt. And the revenues today have been overtaken. Let me give you a stat that will maybe worry you. 100% of the revenues that Nigeria is going to make from crude oil and gas, 100% cannot cover the debt servicing in 2025 budget. 100% of the revenues from oil, from gas, cannot service the debt in the budget. So when you see a stat like that, well, how do you solve it? You've got to cut the spending. That's really it. You can grow GDP, but that's a lagging indicator. Today, from Monday today, costs have already started in the economy. How do we pay those costs today? We're going to have to go borrow before revenues come in.
Now, you did mention, the oil revenues. That's where we make the bulk of our forex from. Are there any other low-hanging fruits? What can we do to also diversify and improve on our portfolio? In what other ways can we generate more foreign exchange so that we can use the money to take care of our debts? Because you said even if you take all the money that we make from oil and throw it into it, we'll just be barely scratching the surface, which is alarming.
Well, you see, the economy, the government needs the money. Maybe you and I might have money, but the government needs that revenue through tax revenues or foreign direct investments or foreign portfolio investments. They need that revenue to come to them. That's where the problem really comes. Short term, we should have diversified the economy, the revenue source in the economy a long time ago, not today. So cocoa is there, cashew is there. We should have done that 10 years ago, and then we didn't reap the benefits today. As we stand today, Nigeria is still a mono economy where we export just crude oil and we get nearly 80% of the bulk of our revenues, foreign revenues, from exports of crude oil and gas. That's where we are today. The only way you can raise substantial revenues in Forex today is your asset sales, literally. That's what you're going to do, or borrowing. We've been borrowing a lot with what we call foreign portfolio investments. So lots of Nigerians and lots of foreigners are buying Nigerian bonds. They're sending dollars in, we're buying Nigerian bonds. But that is a debt, right? This money is coming in that we might have to pay back, either when they sell. But if you sell your assets, you can get foreign currency coming in. You then pay off those debts. You give your budget some space. The time is too short now to do any medium-term thing. Like, we can't diversify the economy in 6 months. So we want to work with the army that we have. Shell is announcing about 20 billion investment in Nigeria in the oil and gas. That's not going to happen tomorrow. And that's FDI. So is that going to go buy an oil field or bring in equipment? It's not raw revenues that's going to go to the government. That FDI is then what generates revenues that the government is going to then tax later on. So for now, again, there's no going back. We've got to do an austerity budget, reduce the spending, reduce that spending. So the revenues you then make, pay your foreign currency debts, and then use the local taxes they're going to make to then do your infrastructure and to pay salaries. Where there's no need to run around. It's a very, very simple strategy that we have to do. The issue is the foreign debt. Attack that immediately and then move on.
All right. Final question will be that the Financial Reporting Council, as we speak, announced plans to actually start to integrate the, basically looking at integrating the Islamic finance system. It's used globally and so on. What do you make of that? If you can answer in 30 seconds.
Yeah, it's a good one. And Nigeria is, we have lots of Muslims here, and we have to create a center for Islamic finance, what we call non-interest finance in Nigeria. So that attracts more capital from Middle East to Nigeria that can then boost our revenue flows and, of course, investment. So it's good to do that, yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Kalu Aja, for speaking with us.
Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.